Arsenal 2, Sunderland 2. That was painful. That was a tough way to end the game. I'd honestly rather have drawn 1-1. You know, at half-time, if you'd said we'll end up drawing the game 1-1, we'll get one back, but I'd have probably gone, do you know what? Based on that first half performance, I'll take that. Based on the way that we came out in the second half, to then get ourselves in front and then throw it away like that at the end, so much more painful. So much more painful and so disappointing. That would have been, proper result of champions. To have had that first half at the Stadium of Light, well, as much as you go, it's Sunderland. Sunderland have been unbelievably good this season at the Stadium of Light. And, if we'd come away from there with 3 points, it would have been a huge, huge statement. And unfortunately, we just couldn't quite make it. We couldn't quite make it. And that is a bitter pill to swallow. Look, in terms of the first half, obviously the lineups, it was exactly as we had expected. Really, a shame that we didn't have anyone on the bench coming back from injury. Our bench, in terms of attacking players, you're looking at Dalman, Waneri, and Andre Harriman-Anus, 3 teenagers. Doesn't give you many options. But yeah, look, the lineup was the lineup. And in the first half, we really struggled. I don't actually know what the stats on that first half were. But yeah, I mean, we created 0.54 XG, which was more XG than they created, which I find interesting because I thought the goal that they scored would have been a high XG. Anyway, point is, we were struggling to create. And they were making it incredibly difficult, and it was incredibly stop-start. And I have to say, Craig Pawson, the referee, and I don't want to blame the result or anything on the referee here, but he did make it the exact game that Sunderland wanted. He made it virtually a non-contact game for us. Every duel was given as a foul, and it made it so stop-start. And then you had the head injuries as well, which that's not his fault at all. But, it was just like, we were half an hour into the game, and I was thinking, I don't really feel like I've seen any football here. And that made it difficult for us to build any sort of rhythm, any sort of momentum. And then, of course, they get that goal. And look, you don't need me to tell you it's not a foul. Like, it's Eze has one on the edge of the box. I've not seen the Eze one on the edge of the box back, which I felt like was a foul at the time. But then it was like that, the insanity for him to then give the free kick immediately after that when Zubimendi's completely won the ball. It was just like, what are you doing? And then to book him for it as well, I couldn't believe it, to be honest with you. However, from that point, we still shouldn't concede. It's sloppy defending from us. It's one lumped ball up into the box. They win the first ball, they win the second ball. For what Arsenal have been so far this season, to lose the first and second ball, pretty unacceptable. We've not done that this season. So yeah, it was a frustrating goal to concede. Obviously, it ended 8 clean sheets in a row. That was always going to be a painful goal to concede. And we got in at halftime, and I was worried. I didn't really see how we were going to make a change. I thought we were really struggling. If I bring this back up, I thought we were really struggling with Mikel Merino up top. And we'll talk about the issues I think we have with Mikel Merino up top in a second. But I thought we were really struggling there. As I said, in terms of the players to come off the bench, we didn't really have any options, particularly because, in my head, Merino was a bit of the problem. But if you take him off, you lose any sort of outlet in terms of a physical presence up top. And yet we came out in the second half and we were so much better. And again, if you go and look at the stats for the second half in comparison to the first, 1.55 XG, 3 big chances, 5 shots on target. It was so much better. The Zubimendi feeding it into Timber and then Zubimendi feeding it into Saka, who probably should have scored off his left. And then, we get the goal back. It was a great goal. And Trossard is finding balls into Calafiori and one into Zubimendi on his left foot. And it was just like so much better. It was night and day compared to the first half. And certain players, and I've spoken about this season already, for me, certain players are able to turn the notch up. And when they do, the whole team does. And one of them is Declan Rice. Declan Rice, probably the biggest one. And again, in the second half, he was just relentless, absolutely relentless. And we get that first goal back because of his pressing. He eats up that ground. Can't remember who it was that lost the ball for them. but it is all about Declan Rice winning the ball back there, and that sets us up to then score the goal. Brilliantly taken goal from Bukayo Saka, by the way. And I'm really glad for Saka in that sense, because he had a big miss, in my opinion, on his left foot. In the first half, I thought he'd struggled. People have spoken about, his goals in the Premier League in the last sort of 9 months, his performances away from home, lots of things. And so for him to finish that in the way that he did, it's such a good finish off his right foot, and he's shown that finish time and time again. It was brilliant. And then from that point, we kept going. And Sunderland didn't really know what to do. They continued to sit in deep. Zubimendi crashes one against the bar. What a goal that would have been. And then Trossard gets his goal. And what a finish it was on his right foot. Calafiori makes that overlapping run, takes both of the defenders away, and that was a mistake from Sunderland. It frees up that space, and it's such a good strike. And I was buzzing for him for that. He has earned that. His performances in recent weeks had earned that moment. And even in the celebrations, I saw him smiling. I saw Leandro Trossard smiling, and he deserved that. And at that point, you think, we should see it out from here. We've not conceded 2 goals in a game this season. Sunderland had not really offered anything at all in the second half, but we couldn't. And there were early warning signs. If we're actually honest, David Raya's got a terrible rating here. I'd ignore the rating, but David Raya had to make a couple of big saves. I think maybe they didn't count towards the rating because it ended up being offside, or there was a foul in the build-up or whatever. No, it was offside, wasn't it, when he made that double save? But then he made one other really big save where he came rushing out, and he was saving us at that point. But there were warning signs in terms of us struggling to close the distances down, and players were looking tired. I thought Saka looked tired, and Eze looked tired, and eventually Eze went off for Mosquera. I thought Rice was beginning to flag. I thought Marino was flagging. I thought, a lot of players were, and this for me is where and I've said it, and people have disagreed with me, and fair play to them. You don't have to agree at all, but I don't understand the lack of substitutions. And I tweeted this, and people said, "Oh, well, what substitutions would you have made?" Well, let's look at the players that didn't come on: Ben White, Miles Lewis-Skelly, Piero Hincapié, Christian Norgard. I'm not talking about bringing on kids to see out the game. I completely agree with not bringing these players on, but these 4, who are experienced, who are athletic, Hincapié in that moment, the pace that he's got to close down. You look at where the cross came in, ultimately for the goal that they scored. His pace and aggression and tenacity to get to that. I didn't understand not having them on the pitch to see out the game. Maybe it wouldn't have made a difference. But for me, it just felt like they needed to be on. I've seen some people saying that actually bringing Mosquera on for Eze was a mistake because that was like a signal that we were defending. That wasn't the mistake. Eze was knackered. He wasn't contributing much. Bringing on Mosquera there, I thought was a sensible decision. I just thought we could have brought on more. And ultimately you end up walking away from the game now absolutely gutted. You've got to sit on that for the international break. And I guess all we hope for tomorrow is that Liverpool and City draw, and that way neither of them have gained ground on us this weekend. And there is some perspective to be had, right? We are, as it stands, 7 points clear. Of course, City could close the gap to 4 tomorrow. Liverpool could close the gap to 5 tomorrow, or they could draw and will remain 6 ahead of City and 7 ahead of Liverpool. You've got to say Sunderland, they are third in the league on merit. An impressive performance from them. And, look, if you had told us, this is where the perspective matters. And nothing is going to stop the fact that conceding today was always going to hurt. And the first time that we dropped points, it was always going to hurt, right? But realistically, if we hadn't dropped points today, the next game was Spurs. If we hadn't dropped a point, and that would have hurt. And then the next game would have been Chelsea, and that would have hurt. And then the next game would have been Brentford, and that would have really hurt because you're at home to Brentford. And then the next game would have been Villa away, and that's Unai Emery. There was going to be a point where the winning streak would end, and it would be painful. And this is the one, and it's extra painful because it feels unnecessary, and it felt like we had sort of ridden that roller coaster and got back into it. But if At the end of this City game, when we were 5 points behind in the Premier League, if you had said at that point, you're going to win 10 games in a row and draw one, or if you just said at that point, in your next 11 games after this one, you're going to win 10, you're going to draw one, I think we'd have all said, I'll absolutely take that. So in terms of perspective, it's not the end of the world. And I do think that's important. Like, and by the way, there are people, Arsenal fans, right, that have been desperate for this. And you saw them. I saw them in the YouTube live chat for the watch along. You know, when we were 1-0 down, they're there. Oh, Arteta's rubbish. X, Y, and Z players are rubbish. Told you this was going to happen. Then we go 2-1 up. They all disappeared. Like, we watched the live view account dropping as they disappeared. We concede an equaliser, they're back. And you've got to tune those people out. We need to, remove them from the conversation because they genuinely don't want us to succeed because they're locked into being right rather than Arsenal doing well. You cannot let them, over this international break, bring down what has been a very, very good period because we need to come back after the international break and hit the ground running. The cavalry are returning. We should have multiple players back from injury at that point. And we've got to kick on. Spurs-Chelsea, 2 massive games. I'll be live on here tomorrow for the watch along with Liverpool-Man City, by the way. So subscribe for that. If you're not already subscribed, by the way, please do. Please like the video. And other than that, I'd say try and enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'll be honest, all of that perspective talk, in terms of drawing against all of that perspective talk, I'm fuming and it's ruined my weekend. But this is where we're at. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you on the live stream tomorrow. And until then, goodbye.